We made it to the final fourth part. Started this series like, hey, I'm just gonna do one big video, and then maybe two, then three. Now we're at four, so we're doing great. We're gonna do a fourth part now. We're gonna focus on summative assessments and taking informed action. Okay, so throughout this entire little lesson plan series, we've been doing colonial religion, as you can see from the top. And first part, we did the standard. Second part was questions. Third part was the formative assessment. And now, all the way to the end, we're finally at summative performance task and taking informed action. So we finally made it. We're here. And really, this is kind of the end as far as scaffolding up to students mastering some kind of historical thinking ability. If you watch the third part, you know that we're doing monitoring and questioning, and we had all those formative assessments in order to kind of get kids up to it. So we call those performance tasks. Kids are performing; they're being graded on their performance. They're being shown why, what they're doing is good, and they should be getting points for it because that they should be getting some kind of representation in their grade of them, mastering these things. Like each level of performance is a new level of mastering, so that grade should represent that. Scrolling down to summative performance task, this is now where we would be at the end. This is kind of the big way for students to show mastery over monitoring. And we first start with the inquiry-based argument. So students have to make some kind of argument, and it has to be based off inquiry. So I just, again, I made these things up. I made them up based off what I think would be interesting in a history class. There's so many different things that you can do. And so when thinking about these, just really try to think of something that would be just, I don't know, fascinating for the kids to perform. So for example, find a passage from your textbook for each of the following topics: early religion in the colonies, witchcraft / the Salem witch trials, and the Great Awakening. Those are the three topics that were talked about in the primary sources, and students who have a textbook will most likely find those three topics. Using your knowledge, analysis, and notes from the sources, write how useful you think the textbook passages are in describing the topic. So this takes everything the kids have done across, those three different primary source analyses and performance tasks, everything. And so they should save it all, like that paragraph they wrote, the list they wrote, everything. And they should use that as evidence to say well, I don't think this is right, or I think this is right. I think they could have gone farther here because of blank. And the entire time they're explaining themselves. They are showing their ability to use their monitoring and questioning at the highest level, which would be to challenge something else. And if I go back to my monitoring and questioning task, you'll see where down here it says, describe the strengths and weaknesses of the source. That's the big thing that we can do with monitoring and questioning that we want students to do. Not only that, if I scroll all the way to the top again to my standards, I think one of them talked about that. Yeah, right here, this one. Evaluate the relevance and utility of a historical source. So basically describing whether it's useful or not. So it matches our theme, it matches our topic, it matches our standards. This is a very well formed lesson, if I do say so myself. And the extension, I always write, I think extensions are important because you might have some students who just need the extra extension, or this could be seen as a way if students can't master their first time, maybe this could be the extension where they can master it. So always having a backup plan is a good idea, just because more times than not you're going to need it. So I thought a cool extension could be find more sources about religion in the early American colonies and explain how they improved the understanding of religion in America. This is a really important one because part of monitoring and questioning is students being able to go out and find their own sources. The truth is, I gave these sources to you, and if I was the teacher giving these to my students, the students didn't really have to work hard to find the sources. I very much chose these on purpose, and these were chosen by other organizations because we know they'll work. It's a lot harder to make up your own sources and say whether it's true or not. Kids are going to kind of trust these automatically. So a good way to do that, to see if they can actually find their own sources, is go let them, ask them, hey, how would you do this? And you might have to do some modeling again. Show them how you would find sources. I remember when I was teaching, I had to do that all the time. I had to go to my computer, go and connect it to my smartboard, and I would be all right, guys, well, give me a topic. I would even ask kids for their topics and be yeah, here it is. And I would show them how to do it. and then I would expect them to go do it. But modeling is huge and important, so please make sure you are doing this. Even with the summative assessment, I think it's worth it because it just gives students a little more guidance to move on themselves. Next one, taking informed action now. So we got understand, assess, and act. And these are kind of go from like basic to more advanced. So understanding, or I should say first, like taking informed action is important. Um, Actually doing informed action could be seen as another way of mastering a skill or just one more piece of evidence to say that they are mastering it, because doing these things, just like doing these things and writing about them, that's cool, but like hopefully students are seeing a lot of connections between like religion and society and decisions, and so if they can take that information and apply it to something else and start creating some solutions or some guidance, that could be really worthwhile. Because I mean, just like how religion affected colonial America, good and bad, it definitely affects us good and bad today too. And giving students, an opportunity to take an action about that would be excellent. So, first basic level, understand the students are going to find an example in the news on how religion affected a social decision. So you're just giving them an opportunity to go out, maybe during class time or maybe as extra credit, whatever, maybe as a bell ringer one day. Let the students go on Newsella, let the students go on CNN, let the students go on whatever, and like find something that they know like religion affected this decision. The next one is assess. So you're going to determine what sources you would need to better understand how religion affected the social decisions that you found. Find at least one of those resources. So this kind of goes back up to that extension right here. Or I'm sorry, it doesn't go back to the extension. Earlier, students had to come up with questions on like what they think they would need, but they also like developed like a list of like sources, like what kind of sources do you think you'll need, and this kind of does that again, like what sources do you need, list them out, and normally that's the end of it. But I think the action would then be like, okay, go find it then, because just making a list and actually going out and finding things are two very different actions. So that one kind of just again goes to the next level, and then finally the third one is act, we call it. Create some kind of graphic, I said, like a painting, online animation. I think any kind of graphic would be cool. And that compares how religion affected decisions today to how religion affected communities in the past. So, like, I was kind of thinking this would be a fun one for a compare and contrast of present day and past. They're going to have to find some present day stuff first, but a lot of our activities did that. And then the past ones, obviously, their analysis could be the connection. And I was inspired to do a graphic because I didn't show you this, but Appendix A actually is a really cool graphic I found from The Economist that shows a timeline from 1300 to 1850, and it's the amount of accusations and executions of people who are accused of being a witch. So I thought this was interesting because it not only shows you like how like far it went, like it shows you like in like looks like 1625 was at its worst, and it is only for Europe. It's European witchcraft, and even shows you like which countries like by their population, like how many each one did. Like so, I think it's fascinating, obviously. And you could argue like, well, it's only European, it's not American, but Europe and America were very connected. Like you could even show them, you could show students like the immigration charts that were happening from Europe to America and see if that affected it at all. Because as we can see, Salem witch trials happened, I want to say like 1620, something like that. As I've been teaching about it this entire time, I've kind of forgotten. But I'm pretty sure it happened around here, which is about where the spike was. I kind of want to double check and make sure I'm right. Here's a question for everybody. When did the Salem witch trials happen? Let's see, I think this one will tell us. Come on. I'm going to say 1624. Oh my god, I was way off. It's the 1690s. Okay, I knew it was 1600. That's something, right? All right, I'm only a history teacher. So 1690s, so going back to that chart then, we can kind of see that it kind of came in at the end of this. So that could be a good, interesting question. Like, why did this happen at the end? Did the immigration like bring it here, or like was it just like was the this counter reformation, was America just behind the times? That could be an interesting question for kids to start noticing. You can even ask them like, why were certain populations more likely to do it? Could be an interesting comparison for the kids to make. So, going back into these are all different ways you can do it. I feel like I did a good enough job talking about it, so I'm going to go to the conclusion. All right, so that wraps up doing our colonial religion lesson plan review. I don't know. I think I've called it something different every single time. But this is the conclusion of the fourth part, so I kind of focused on the summative assessment, like how that could actually be used as a final piece. Something I didn't cover is like how you would grade it, and I purposely didn't put rubrics in here just because I feel like that should be more of like the teacher's job. Like you know your students best, you know your grading practices best. Some teachers might really like a rubric, but honestly, I think you need to kind of find your own way. Looking at the way we do this, and I'll even kind of scoot over a little bit. Like this is a different lesson than I did differently, or a different lesson I did differently. This is a different lesson, and it does the same setup though. So like I had a formative assessment, that's performance task number one. Then you had two, three, and then finally here's the summative assessment. So you can kind of see that we keep going up, but my whiteboard's tiny, so I had to go down. But this would keep going up. Like the idea is a scale would be moving upwards. And honestly, like I dropped my pen. I found it. You might even find that some students need extra help. Like you need to build in, if these are big steps, they need to have like a smaller step right here. And so you could do that. You could create something, and you could call it 1.5 or whatever. Don't call it anything. But just the point is, like when you're mastering skills, there needs to be this kind of setup where you get a little more responsibility each time. It becomes a little more difficult each time. That's the entire point. So think of it that way. I was trying to think too. I think I'll do like a how-to video on like how I actually do this. I'm not sure if that'll help or not. It'll be way longer because this lesson plan probably took me 2-3 hours to make. But I mean, I would also say it's nice though because it stretches across 3 days and it automatically connects everything. Like your formative tasks, your summative tasks are all automatically connected, which honestly is one of the biggest mistakes I think young teachers make is they think day by day. They don't think larger, which is a problem because we do need kids to be seeing the connections that we have every single day. So that's all I have. I'm going to come back with more videos. If you have any questions, please leave comments. If you're my students, please email me, call me, or text me. Take care, guys. Bye.